Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dust of Your Kitabs book club meeting. As you know, you guys are book club B. We had our first book club A's meeting yesterday, and it was a good success. And just before we start off, I'll just give you a quick rundown of how things are going to go today, as we've mentioned in the guidelines also, but we'll just go over it again. And I have some bad news for you guys. Navya would not be joining us today till like 4:15, 4:30 due to certain unforeseen circumstances. She'll be slightly late. She'll be joining the meeting at around 4:50 by 4:15, 4:30 today. But all of us can have a great discussion till then as well. I particularly wanted her here because this particular book was recommended by her to me. And then after we read it, we decided we should have it for a book club discussion. Anyway, welcome to the first meeting of this group. And I'll just want to give you a quick brief of how exactly we came about with this idea of this book club and why we're doing it and what we intend to get out of it. Right. So, both of us, Navya and I, had this idea that both of us are huge bibliophiles and we absolutely love the idea of reading and enjoying books together. And we absolutely love to the joy that reading gets to you. And we wanted to share this with the world. And we realized that although non-fiction books are a great thing for us at this point of time, which we are also going to be reading next month, and we alternate with every group, to the extent that it helps us develop key informational patterns and gives us information to be prepared for a world which involves you to think, be more critical about things around you. But at the same time, given how the past 1.5 years have been, the coronavirus and this entire pandemic has had all of us stuck at home, we thought our book club should also have fiction in it to just let our minds free, to make us realize there are better, happier stories out there. Not necessarily happier, as fiction doesn't always is happy, but a world beyond the drab one in which we're living or the dry one which is out there, which lets us think. And to be very honest, fiction is just as fulfilling as non-fiction in terms of making your knowledge spin, to the extent you discover new worlds, new ways of writing, new ways of relaxing, right? So yeah, that got us to choosing our book for the month at Night Circus. It's so very honestly, I don't read a lot of fantasy in general, apart from the usual classics, Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Lord of the Rings. But this one was one book that had me captivated right from the first page, and it's very clear why. It's absolutely wonderfully written. It has a fantastical plot, and I think it deals with a certain conceptions which I think are very worthwhile talking about in certain times, right? Particularly, one is from the narrative. A few are from the narrative perspective, and few are just from the perspective of how the plot plays out. From the narrative perspective, I particularly was a huge fan of the non-linearity of how events are narrated. And I think this is something that has often been challenged in fiction, wherein the reliability of the narrator in the first place is challenged because of how when linear time is used as a narrative device. But particularly when you deal with non-linear events, you are trying to grasp events across unlike your usual time frame, which you have straight in from the beginning of the period, where you're looking straight in one direction. Here you are involved thinking about multiple times, situations, etc. Right? Similarly, I think the other narrative device which I particularly liked was the fact that there were different chapters from different character perspectives, right? Which gave you a very interesting lookout into how events were happening. Because this is something that we always find, that all of us are creatures of our own biases, and we see the world the way we want to, right? And particularly when you're looking back on things. So it is very interesting to see how different characters were looking at the same events as they were playing out. And sometimes you might just not get to know what a particular character thought of a particular event. Coming on to the themes of the book, what particularly stood out for me was, obviously I'm a diehard romantic, so the romance of it was something that really stood out for me. But more than that, I think as we mentioned in the questions, one of the key things that stood out particularly for me was how control worked as a principle, right? And because a lot of us are Indians, and I apologize if I'm overgeneralizing here, but that is a situation that all of us, I think, face at certain points of time in our lives. Indian parents or Indian families tend to be slightly more, uh, let's say, controlling than regular families are, and how that control plays out on the effects of life. Like we see this in Celia and Marco's life, where excessive control by their respective guardians plays a huge role in how they deal with life, how they rebel, how they deal with the world outside. And you you sort of develop a different kind of sympathy for them, for as to how they behave with each other or with the world at large, right? And on the other hand, there is that usual argument, right, like that is put forward by anyone of who advocates the control theory, that, well, it is a fundamental point of human nature to find a purpose in life. And somehow that control was in fact what gave Celia and Marco certain kind forms of purpose in their lives. Otherwise, which, I mean, to think of it, Marco might have had a very non-remarkable life, one which he might have suffered. But on the other hand, he was chosen into this journey. So anyway, I've been blabbering on for a while now. Let's kick off this discussion. The format's quite simple. The idea was that I would introduce the club first and talk about what my discussion points were. We have put in some questions in the email we sent out, but those are just to guide the discussion. Obviously, feel free to talk about anything, because just like fiction, the discussion can take any route you want. It is in your head the way you wish the discussion to go forward. What we'll be doing is people can raise their hands using, there's, I think, a small reaction window upstairs, right at the top of your screen, I guess. You can just raise your hands. We'll recognize you in a particular order of speaking. And yeah, so you can state your point. I'll just briefly go over the guidelines again. As I've mentioned them in the email as well. As I mentioned, this call is being recorded. So if you wish right now, you can you can switch off your camera if you like. There's no compulsion about that. You can change your name to something anonymous as well. Just make sure it's something recognizable so that we can keep track. I mean, we can't have 5 people listed as anonymous. We can't keep track of who wishes to speak. And lastly, also not lastly, you can feel free to just listen in, but we would love if you talk and you can contribute to the discussion, because every idea offers perspective. Lastly, this is intended to be a safe zone. We will not tolerate any kind of bullying, harassment, or any kind of discomfort causing conversations. Kindly avoid using derogatory language. Any sort of such language being used or any instance of harassment would be immediately thrown out of the meeting and would be barred from the meeting. Navya and I would take an executive call on that immediately. Feel free, this is a very safe space. The idea is to be able to discuss your thoughts without being penalized for it or being judged for a particular situation, right? So yeah, that's just the general housekeeping rules. Without any further ado, I think Joshi has raised her hand. So Joshi, you could unmute yourself and you could kick off the discussion. And I think Sanya is next. Sanya Pandit, you could speak after Joshi.
Yes. This is the Joshi you wanted to talk?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I consider myself basically a logic-driven person. You know, that logic is something which appeals to me more than anything. But very surprisingly, I picked up this book and I was totally enchanted and I loved everything about this book. So, last we did Harry Potter series, which really, was extremely enjoyable. And after that, I have I joined this club and, by your suggestion, I came across this book and it was truly enchanting. When you were talking about control, that's an interesting perspective, how control plays a role in our lives. But just, taking that ahead, I think I love the fact that, whatever happens in your life, the final control or the final choice is with ourselves. Like what, Marco and Celia, what they did, this game or this challenge that they were in must be like really beyond themselves, right? We've like earlier, it lasted for a long time and all, but finally, because they had a choice and because they chose to do something, they changed the whole, track of the challenge itself. So that's interesting perspective that, quite uplifting also that, we have that choice. I loved I won't take a lot of time, but yeah, I did love the tent with the clouds. That was my favorite part. I was going around, and I was in the clouds when reading that. That was very interesting. Yeah. Maybe later, if you give me more chance, I'll talk. But for now, I think I'll let others speak.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joshi. We have Sanya Pandit next, followed by Ankita Dhanda, and then Bhakti A.
Hi everyone. Just so nice to meet everybody here. Sorry, it's 6 a.m. here, so I'm a bit like groggy still. But while reading and also the fact that the book had mentions of tarot, really struck me because as somebody that reads tarot, I was able to also, get that symbolism of what's going on, into the narrative as well. Because I don't know if we all remember, but there's a charm that um, Isabel creates, right? So she basically uses this tarot card, which is Temperance, to create this. And basically, this card talks about mediation and the balancing of human nature. And it's so and it stands out to me. Why? Because in the beginning, and I'm gonna blot this a bit, because in the beginning when Isabel is also trying to decipher the link between the two characters central to us, well, there's a bit of like nude imagery in here, so I'm trying to do a censoring. Just don't mind me, don't report me, guys. So what's going on is, again, like in this image as well, when Isabel is trying to discern the link between these two characters at first, she draws this card. And this card is interesting because it's not just your typical romance, but as Jayashree was saying, it's about like, taking away from control, because it represents choice as the highest ideal. There's an angel in here which represents, humanity's essential highest nature. So true love talks about taking the choice not just to tap into your bodily urges, which we see, our two main characters do that a lot. They're refraining from each other so much, and they only give in later, and their love in the end is all about sacrifice, which is, I think, the ultimate, because in the end what they chose is not just the love they had for themselves, but the love that they had for humankind, symbolized by an angel figure or like a super consciousness. Because they're so aware of the fact that yes, we love each other, we love our own individual skills, but there's this circus which is like an entity that is bigger than you, bigger than me, and it sort of transcends the boundaries of what you and I can do individually or in a relationship, which really struck me, because you don't have that a lot. We don't even see that in our movies, honestly, in any movies. So yeah, that was it for me, basically. And let me know if you have any talking points to add to this. I'd love to know.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Sanya. We have Ankita next, followed by Bhakti, followed by Muskan.
Hi everyone, I'm Ankita from Chandigarh. Glad to meet you all here. So there's one point that I want to pick is about the timeline of the book that Siddharth has already called out. So I'm in a corporate. I'm working like 8 to 9 hours, and when I pick up a book by end of the day, I want to read something which is light, right, which actually makes me calm. But when I actually picked up this book, and when I was in the initial chapters, I was reading, and then I was like, okay, this is in 1900 we're talking about. So I had to turn the pages and just go back, okay, which chapter, so this is in continuation to that chapter. So that actually made me think more. Okay, so I was not like laying in a bed and was just reading. I had to pay more attention to this book. So initially it was quite annoying for me, to be honest. I was like, okay, I just want to relax, I don't want to pay this much attention to a book right now. But then later in the stage I actually enjoyed it. This was a bit of a complexity for me because I am more used to read a light book. But then bringing this complexity, this new thing actually made me pay more attention to the book. And I really like trying new things, and this was quite new to me, the timeline and turning the pages back and just connecting the pages and the chapters. So that was actually I'm not really sure yet if I actually enjoyed it or not, but that was something new. And maybe with the coming books, I would be more sure if I want to be more a light reader or I really want to go with such books.
Right.
uh, yeah, another thing that I want to call out is about the imagination that this book has made me go through. So basically, we read a book, there's a girl and a boy sitting on a bench or something like that. But this book has actually made me imagine a circus where there has been tents, where there is some magic going on, there's an illusionist, there is some, a cloud maze is happening where I'm imagining myself, climbing those and everything. So that was quite interesting. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed. It was quite a new addition to my the genre of book that I read. So yeah, good read, I would say, in total. Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you, Ankita. Bhakti, you're next, followed by Muskan.
Hello everyone, I'm Bhakti from Mumbai. Nice to meet you all. I guess my situation will resemble with what Ankita said because we are in a habit of reading when we go in a linear timeline. Like everything happens with particular sequence. And this book was something like you actually needed to go back to the particular date and see, okay, this situation happened. Okay, now we have to come back forward to the same. And you have to keep changing your pages. The stories kept changing and it sometimes it gets irritating that you have to shift back the dates, but this book kept you hooked to this plot. And despite of the fact that the book was into different small chapters, many times it's like there are different chapters. You tend to keep the book away. Okay, I'll read it later. I'll read it tomorrow, sometime next day. But this book kept you hooked. And the imagination is something which is so powerful, like the cloud maze or the magical jars which can take you to places. And the best part was the food, no doubt. The names were like, the chocolate mouse with tails and the chocolate mice, something we have not heard, but we can
Yeah.
fully imagine. That was the best part, imagining, okay, that must be a chocolate, something like that, something. And I guess this love story of Celia and Marcus is something not unusual or a fairy tale is expected, but it had its charm in its own way. The way Celia has been throughout this story. She has been holding on to her magical powers. The way she binds the circus together at the end, and it's like it's a book you can hook up to, and like without being patient, reading the book teaches us to be patient. But this book was something like no more days or more hours. You can just you have time. You just keep yourself hooked to the book. So this was one of the book which kept you engaged throughout the time. But there never came a point where I felt like okay, it's getting boring or it's getting annoying. I should read it sometimes. It was like, okay, something new might be coming up, a new story. Every tent, every circus, every places they traveled, a new story came up.
Right.
So yeah, this was something new and a book I really look up to and would recommend. Okay, if you want something to keep yourself engaged, and a book you would like that would take to your dreamy place. I guess this was the book I really liked it. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhakti. Muskan, you're up next, followed by Juhi.
Guys, I'm from Delhi, and when I started reading this book, I was really enchanted by it, and like again, Ankita said, after a few pages, it became a little tedious for me to go back and like keep a check on the timeline. But I think because the story itself was so enchanting that it kept you hooked onto the book and to the story, and therefore you don't want to leave it, and therefore you're already ready to do that hard work of keeping a check on the timeline. Then for me, I think I really related to Poppet a lot because I, I am obsessed with the moon in some extremely weird way, and I think just like the idea of stars and all, it really fascinates me a lot. So that is something that I related with a lot. And therefore, my favorite tent was the night sky where she goes up, and then there's this entire stargazing that's happening. And the best part is the stars are not fabricated by magic, but it's actually the sky they're looking at. Then, like, just like Bhakti talked about chocolates, somehow the chocolates in the book reminded me of Harry Potter's chocolates, the frog chocolates. And I think the best part for me in this story was that it ends with Widget telling the story, and then it completely makes sense with all the breaks that are between the chapters. That is actually Widget telling the story, and then you just feel like after you finish that book, I actually went through that particular story all over again. It's another story that you were reading. That was extremely beautiful. Yeah, that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Muskan. We have Juhi next, followed by Mohini.
Hey everyone, what's up? I hope everybody is safe because I know what we are going through, and I think that is one of the reason I started reading because I had a lot of time. And like Ankita said, I'm not sure if I remember her name, but yeah, I also work in a IT company, so I am from corporate world. So I have these 8 to 9 hours of work, and after that, I really need something very light book to read, and I am also very happy person. So having something difficult and like a little dark or something, I really cannot handle at all. But Night Circus was my first fiction. I have never tried before. I have always been declined towards the self-help book. So the reason I started reading book is very different from I think other people because I come from a Hindi medium school, and when I moved to Chennai for my degree, it was really difficult there to survive because Chennai nobody speaks in Hindi. You gotta know Tamil or either you speak in English. So I started with self-help book about learning a few things and all, but I think that was a wrong choice because that didn't work out for me well. I could not continue with a lot of books, but I think this year I took a target that I will be completing 12 books, and I have already completed 8 books, and Night Circus is one of them. So I'll start with the story, which is basically the reason why I like Night Circus because I am a fan of movies. And if you read this book, you really want this book to be be a movie. And I went on a Google and I searched is somebody is doing movie on this or if it's already been done. But I think it's not. It's I think still in progress. I cannot remember the producer name who promised. Someone who bought the rights of this story, but I'm just waiting for the movie. And one more thing which I could connect to Belly a lot. He was one of my favorite character. I really wanted to know that what is going to happen in his life and how did he just came into this whole story of these two characters. So he was someone who really kept me going from reading this book. And like other people said, ki, yeah, there are a lot of plots and uh, uh, you might remember, okay, how did he came or how did she came or from where did this story started. So in the beginning I felt similar. I went back to some pages and I read, but after when you try to notice that there is a belly, then there is another, there is like a story going on. But so that was one part which I was really looking forward to know that what will be Bailey's story, what will he will be doing, he'll do in the last. But I was really not happy with the ending at all. I really appreciate the writing, the way a writer has tried to kept us going to the end of the story. But end is really something which disappoints you because you did not expect the. I thought that Belly will have some role to play, but this ending really I wanted to know that how this whole competition will go. How did and of course she was my favorite character. So and when she dies, of course nobody likes that thing. But of course I think like other people said, Poppet was of course one of the character which we all were looking when they were born. It was very coincidence that they were not supposed to born, but they are circus born. So that was also one more thing which I like. The reason why I thought I will be able to continue this book is because I have been to circuses, the place where I stayed, and in the beginning, writer says that circus comes without any sort of announcement, and they just come one night. So similar thing happened to me when I was a kid in childhood, and it was near my place where I used to stay. So I could relate, and circus is something which really takes me to that world, that how amazing and how did they do all these magics and tricks. So that is one of the things which I'm gonna appreciate about this book. But like other people said, it's not gonna be one of the favorite of my read. But one thing is, of course, we can appreciate the writing, and we really want this to be a movie for sure. We are really looking forward to that. Other than that, I think I like the plot and how writer has tried us to you cannot, even though it irritates you at some point, you cannot stop reading because you want to know what's going to happen next. What is the end of the story? So that is one part which is really appreciative. And yeah, like I am someone who's really looking forward to start my journey into writing. So in that point, this book was one of the plus point for me. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. That's all.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Juhi. We have Mohini next, followed by Mitali and Isha.
Hello, everyone. Hope you are having a wonderful day and all of you are staying safe. My name is Mohini Basu, and I'm a digital marketing manager. First of all, I would like to thank Siddharth and Navya for starting this book club. Because Siddharth, like you, even I am a voracious reader, and in my circle, in my network, and everything, there were always times that I was the one who was reading more and giving people recommendations, right? And of course, there's Goodreads, and you can go online and talk to people and get recommendations. But having a book club like this, which is a very serious and legitimate place where people would be consistent and give recommendations. So thanks so much, because if you guys had not suggested, I would not have come across this amazing book. So now coming to this book, but so that one more thing I'll just mention. I can see your bookshelf, and it's so. I just feel like I wish I could go there and pick up the things and discuss. But I can also see Circe, the book. That was actually the book I read before the Night Circus. So I'm really looking forward to more recommendations coming from you guys, because I'm feeling that somewhere it matches with the kind of books I like to read as well. Now, coming back to the book, I think all of you covered such wonderful, insightful points. One thing that I was also thinking on similar lines to some of the things that you guys have mentioned. One thing that I think hasn't been touched upon, and also wasn't mentioned in the themes, the talking points that Siddharth had mailed us, was regarding the colors, how the colors have been used in the book, right? So basically, when we start out the book and we come to know about that, okay, this is the circus, which is just in black and white, which is so different from how you would imagine a circus. The colors of a circus, like bright and colorful, and they just add to the whole vibe of a circus, right? Whereas this circus is black and white, and of course black because it operates only in the night. And when it comes to white, it can be interpreted in your own ways. I think that because light adds light, like white adds light to your life. So if you're part of a circus and you watch it, you get entertained, you get surprised, all those things. And the quality of the circus was so high end as well, right? So that for me was one of the points. And also the fact that Alexander, how he wears gray, so the symbolism of that. So I think that was very interesting. That is one thing. And secondly, yes, we are talking about the storyline, and we are talking about the entire screenplay, which was so interesting. But one of the things was that the dialogues, okay, how each and every conversation between the characters, that's so layered. If you look at it, if you just look at it in one way, linear way, you can just think of somebody asking something and somebody responding. But if you think deeper, right, you will even that is like a circle. The Circe, the word that comes from circle, right? So it tells you so much about a character, everything. It's so layered. So and later on you realize why this person is saying that and everything when you go on about the book. So I think these two points would be my takeaway, apart from all the wonderful things that you all have mentioned. And thank you so much, Siddharth and Navya, once again for starting this. Yeah, looking forward to more such insightful recommendations and amazing conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohini. We have Mitali next, followed by Isha.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. And thank you so much, Siddharth, for doing this. My key takeaway, okay, so to start with, I'm again not big on fantasy at all. I think the last time I read something has to be Harry Potter, and I keep rereading it, and I don't think anything can top it, to be very honest. So while it was on my reading list for a while, I never got to reading this book, but I mean, I finally got the push to read it now. The thing, I think my first observation with the book was that I usually like to relate to certain qualities and characters in the book. And when I first started reading it, I was not sure that was going to happen here. Considering also because the worlds are very different, right? This is fantasy at the end of the day. I'm not creating magic anywhere. So that's something that I did find very interesting. And I realized later when I was finishing the book that I did relate to a lot of these characters and certain qualities, maybe not the characters themselves. Like, for example, Chandrash's frustration with his lack of productivity, where his life was going. You feel those aspects, right? I'm sure everyone's felt it at some point in their lives, in their careers, in education. You feel the frustration when Celia and Marco are discussing, I mean, what the hell are they doing? And, how do they stop this? And their lack of control, you feel it. You feel that frustration. Also because people around them are dying, people they love, they're dying. I mean, it's affecting their actions are affecting people around them. So I think those aspects sort of came out for me a lot later. I'll just go back to the talking points. Okay, so I do think that when I was reading the book, I was really not hoping for Marco and Celia to fall in love. I mean, I was obviously rooting for them. You do have that thought, but when it did happen, it didn't take me aback. I was not shocked, and I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that it sort of seemed like it was meant to be. I mean, they fell in love because their entire basis of the relationship was curiosity. It was the fact that they were enamored by each other, but not so much by each other, but by what they were doing, even though they didn't know each other at all. They were impressed and they were I think very much, exactly like I said, they were very much curious about what the other person was doing. So I think it was meant to be in a way. I mean, that is where it would have gone anyway. I love the fact that the narrative perspective kept changing through the book, because then it gives you an idea of what the circus looks like from inside, and then what a person who is slightly associated with the circus feels, experiences. And then there's someone like Bailey who has absolutely no idea till the very end who the the main people in the circus are. So it gives you sort of different perspectives, and you don't feel lost. You feel like you know a little bit about the circus, the people, through different people in the book. And I love that, because I didn't feel like I was completely lost. And yeah, I think more or less this sort of gave me do I love the book? I guess I found it was brilliant writing, absolutely brilliant writing. I'm not a big fan of fantasy, so I don't think I'll reread it again. I'll probably still go back to reading Harry Potter again if I have to read fantasy. But brilliant detailing. It helped me visualize details of magic and fantasy very clearly. It wasn't very difficult for me to follow, which I loved. So I visualized all of it very easily. I find it very difficult with fantasy novels usually. Keeping that in mind, keeping the character growth in mind, I loved the book. So yeah.
Right. Thank you, Mitali. Thank you. We have Isha up next.
Okay, hi everyone. I hope you're doing safe. I just want to start off by saying that this book was a really good concoction of the movie Prestige and Harry Potter. I don't know why. I don't know why while reading the book I was keep going back to the movie Prestige, and then I think I'll watch that movie after this. Also, I was in a deep reading slump, but thankfully to this book, I'm finally out of it and I can go back to reading books. Um, Talking about the timeline, I didn't find any difficulty in following through it because I read a lot of Murakami books. And usually in Murakami's books, it's like your one foot is in one dimension and your another foot is in a parallel dimension. So following the timeline was pretty fine for me. What there were few instances where I related to it on a personal level, where Celia's father says you are a disappointment, and she says doing more is exhausting. As a 22-year-old jobless adult, I relate to that, and it felt like a truck was hard hitting me, like a truck literally ran over me. So it was that, and it was. I think this book really enhanced my imaginative skills. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Isha. And guys, I'll just chime in with a bit here. I mean, these are some really interesting points all of you have mentioned, and a lot of them, some which I haven't thought of. But just off the bat, as much as I always go through this cycle, I read a fantastic book and I wish to see it on screen. but more often than not, I'm disappointed by what turns out, whether it's a TV show or a movie. So I'm, as much as I would want to see this, I really don't think the only one I till date. I think I think I saw this on Instagram a few days back. Someone posted about it. I think it was Muskan or some. I think who posted about the namesake. Namesake's one of the only rare book interpretations which I've seen, which where the book's adaptation lives up. But apart from that, I think for me, the few things that came out through the discussion were a very curious way how human emotions are explored in this book, right? I mean, for example, we see the two protagonists and their respective guardians, right? They're polar opposites. They're like the guardians are absolutely, cold, emotionless. They're driven by a certain purpose in life. Why? And somehow these children, and when they throughout growing up, they discover these emotions. They allow themselves to feel these emotions, and that's where I stumbled for the first time, I guess, because as much as I'm a huge romantic and I love to believe all the Bollywood and Hollywood movies we see about romance, I found it initially very difficult to believe the fact that Celia and Marco fall for each other, because at the end of it, they did not know each other. They were driven by this search for an opponent, and what they're doing, and try to figure out what, and they were enamored by the idea, and sure, sparks fly when they meet each other. But for me, that was slightly where I stumbled, although they did have undeniable chemistry, and I think that goes to the credit of the writer as to how they have like explored and been able to convince people that, well, this is a fair way of going about doing things. But I was far more curious about how just these basic emotions develop, right? I mean, you have Celia being brought up by a cold father who's just not treating her right, and she has barely any other interactions. And it's even worse for Marco. But at least for a few years, Marco does at least have a girlfriend. He learns to understand other emotions from another perspective. But I guess, yeah, that's something that I would be very curious to know your thoughts on. The other thing that actually also had me thinking was about how the role of how Bailey was entrusted with the entire. I was not very comfortable with how the entire transition happened, to the extent that I found it to be borderline selfish at a certain point of time, because as much as I root for love, it seemed just a bit too much to ask three children who, okay, maybe the circus kids, they would have, the twins knew what the circus was, and it was everything for them. Bailey was attracted to it, and all of us, I think, have been at this place in our life, right? Like, we've had phases where for like a year or 2 years we're just obsessed with something, we absolutely love it, and probably won't have that same amount of dedication back, like, say, now. So binding someone for life to something that they're obsessed with right now is just seemed a bit, I don't know, unfair to the kid on my end. But again, that's I guess being the logical side of me coming to the front. But I was so impressed by the fact that you guys mentioned the colors, because the colors actually spoke out a lot to me as well. Like, when I was reading the book, particularly how Alexander wore gray. That was the key clincher for me during the entire thing. But I think I've spoken enough. I'll let other people speak. We have Janvi and then Muskan. I'm sorry, Mitali and Isha, do you want to speak again, or have you just have not raised your hands? Just a quick reminder, guys, if you're done speaking, you can unraise your hand and raise it again so that I can recognize you. So, Janvi, you're next, followed by Muskan.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, I hope you're all doing well. Like continuing on the point that you brought up, that is Celia and Marco's relationship, right? So, this is one point where I felt the book kind of missed out on, because, of course, like Marco was drawn to Celia from the very first instance, like when she auditioned for the circus. But I feel that their romance was not actually explored that much, and it felt rather sudden and kind of vague to me. Of course, I was expecting, because they're protagonist and they will eventually fall in love, but it was rather vague for me. And also, most of their relationship was more into building tents together, so I thought they could have done something besides that. And like, I wish just the writer had written other things beside what their life was in the circus, like their relationship besides the circus. So that's something. And regarding that part where like you are interesting the entire circus with 2 or 3 kids. That is something I could not wrap my head around. And for Poppet, like obviously Poppet was one very responsible kid. Of course, she loved the circus enough to like take it upon herself to save it. But why did she bring Bailey into all of this, right? And sort of
Did we lose her? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so Muskan, you can speak now, and then Sanya, and we could probably have her back when she joins back in. I think Janvi's here, guys. Just a second, hold on. I think she's here. It would be great if we could complete her point. Janvi, if you're listening, you can continue talking. Sorry, we lost you in the middle.